You're listening to Yo Quiero Dinero, a personal finance podcast for the modern Latina. I'm your host, Janice Torres Rodriguez, and I'm here to help you be poderosa with your dinero. I'm an engineer, a blogger, and an entrepreneur that built a $50,000 side hustle, and I'm obsessed with all things personal finance. On this show, we're going to talk about how to make dinero, how to keep your dinero, and how to make it grow. Are you ready? Vámonos. Hola, mi gente. Welcome back to another episode of Yo Quiero Dinero, the podcast. This is your host, Janice, and today's episode is going to be all about how to leverage your 9-to-5 skills to launch your own business. And we're going to be talking to Lisette Calveiro. She is a digital consultant, creator, and business coach over at lisettecalveiro.com. And she's going to talk to us about how she took her 8 years of experience in PR and digital marketing and created her own brand and business where now she is serving as a digital strategist, a content creator, and an influencer marketing coach. I can't wait to get into this conversation with Lisette. Lisette is a Miami native and New York City transplant, working in the heart of the city as a digital strategist, content creator, and business coach. An established influencer and content creator for more than 4 years, her digital channel focuses on money, business, and influencer marketing advice with a pinch of her lifestyle recommendations and global finds. She has a strong pulse on the millennial and Gen Z community. Lisette was previously director of influencer marketing at Ogilvy and has more than 8 years of experience in PR and digital marketing, working across global and Fortune 500 brands in different genres. Her expertise is in social media, influencer marketing, digital partnerships, and earned media strategy. This conversation with Lisette was super insightful. If you've ever thought about what it's like to actually be an influencer, the behind the scenes, how you make money, how you work with brands, all this stuff and more, Lisette's going to be answering all your questions and more. Hola, mi gente. Let me tell you, when I was first thinking and dreaming up this podcast, I really had no idea where to even start. That is until I found the Anchor app. If you haven't heard about Anchor, it is legit the easiest way to make a podcast. And let me tell you why. First of all, it's free. And you know, if it's free, it's for me because I do not have time or money to be spending on boberias that is not going to even accomplish what I'm trying to do. Anchor helps me with so many different aspects of my podcast. It's crazy that they're offering this for free. Mind-boggling. They have creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your teléfono, mija. You don't even need like a freaking expensive computer. But if you do have an expensive, beautiful computer, you can use that too. Anchor will help you distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, and you can share it with your abuelitas and your primas without any freaking stress. I mean, doesn't that sound amazing? I know I love that feature more than anything because it's a one and done. Once your podcast is created, it's going to go out through the interwebs, into people's phones, into wherever podcast app they listen to, and they can find you right away. The best part, you can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. So you don't need to be stressing about finding podcast sponsors. Girl, they take care of that too. I mean, what are you waiting for? It's literally everything you need to make a podcast in one place. So if you're ready to launch your own podcast, download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. I can't wait to see the magic that you create. Lisette, thank you so much for being here. I'm super excited to talk to you.
Same here.
So for the audience, I found you on Instagram. You have an amazing following and you are such a natural when it comes to like living that influencer life in a way that really like captivates people and wants them. It made me want to find out more about you. And I'm sure once people hear this interview, they're going to find out so much more about you. But why don't you go ahead and start with introducing yourself to the audience?
Thank you. That's so kind. So, my name's Lisette, and I am a digital creator, consultant, and coach. So, we could totally unpack those three identities here. But essentially, I'm also all things influencer marketing, both from the brand side, the creator side, and educating creators.
Awesome. All right. So, as you probably know, this podcast is called Yo Quiero Dinero, and it talks about money, but it's more than that. We talk about not only things you should be doing with your money, but entrepreneurship. And so, I love that you talk about money on your platform, and I'm curious where that relationship started. What was your relationship like with money growing up? How did you first become interested in wanting to know more about how finances worked? Can you talk me through that?
Yeah. So I am actually daughter of immigrants. They came to Miami about a year before I was born. And I feel like that is actually a very important part to my money story because they kind of built my money beliefs, and everything that I learned about money was through them, which, spoiler alert, was not a lot because they didn't really understand how the American financial system works at all. So I grew up, with that ethic of work, make money, work hard, work, and work meant labor, right? So I
Mm,
knew that I had to do some sort of career to make money, quotes. But thankfully, my parents, like many Hispanic parents, they started off with the you must be a doctor or a lawyer, and they killed that thought when they realized that I have no interest in those things, and they let me pursue a journalism kind of base career, which eventually ended up becoming public relations. I studied that in college, and then that became my career. And I felt that while I was passionate about other things, or I was always like a young entrepreneur, I never wanted to pursue that route because I was raised with the money you make is from the education you have. And it's this very linear mentality, right? So
hmm
when I graduated from college, I also had a lot of student loan debt because I had to pay for all of it myself, not just school, but housing and everything. And I quickly got into credit card debt. And it was also because the money beliefs that I had translated into when you have money, you give it up. So you spend
hmm
on things you don't need. You have no context on how to get out of debt. It's just kind of that's how my parents were. And it translated into my young adult life. And I spent the first few years out of college just racking up credit card debt. The wake up call came in 2016 because I was moving to New York. I was now about 4 years into my career in public relations, and I was like, I'm ready to go to New York. This means that I won't be going on an entry level salary, which in New York you need to have a little bit more. And at that moment, I realized, I started looking at my finances for the first time because I also had an avoidance. I didn't even want to look at them. I had auto pay, and I knew that that was enough. I wasn't going to go into bancarrota, which my parents went into, each of them in their own phase of their life. And I just got shocked, being like, wow, I have about $10,000 of credit card debt across different cards, which was a big problem. You max out a few, and then you got a couple thousand here, a couple thousand there, and then when you actually look at them together, that's a different number. And that shock and that kind of wake up call made me start to get more educated on my finances. So the education came from really understanding the technicalities, and I started to learn about debt and learning about paying things off. I started a savings account, which I had never had to date. And the move to New York still happened, but the move to New York became a little bit more of a money intentional move where I was a little bit more frugal. I had a very cheap apartment living further away. I knew that I had to really buckle up my lifestyle to pay off my loans. So, and to pay off my credit card debt. My formula was really just spend less, make more, clear your debt. And that worked. I got out of credit card debt in 18 months, and it was great to be debt free from credit cards, but I hadn't tackled my money limiting beliefs, which I'm sure we'll
Mm,
get to speaking here, but it was almost like a band-aid solution to clear out your debt. But then you had to really address the core of how I even got into the debt. And
yeah.
that involved me writing down what I believed about money, and then over the last few years, really chipping away what that meant. Particularly, one of them, which we can get into, was this idea that I needed to have a desk job that matched my degree in order to make money. And when I finally was able to let go of that belief and realize that you can make money doing whatever you're passionate about, whether that is sitting at a desk at a career you love or doing your own thing, I realized that for me, it actually was doing my own thing. And that's kind of how it led me to where I am now, being more of this solopreneur, entrepreneur, when I just let that belief come in that money can come from doing the things you're passionate about, and switching to more of the abundance mindset. And long story long, that's really kind of my long journey. It's this shift that has happened over the last few years has been the most important, because while I was able to do tactical things to get out of debt, I've been able to sustain a very financially healthy relationship with money. I also cleared my student loans in March, so I am 100% debt free, and I my net worth is the biggest it's ever been because again, just the limiting beliefs or that extra factor that I was missing.
Oh my gosh, I love your story so much, and I can relate to so many aspects of this. So let's break down some of the stuff you talked
Yeah.
about. Um, the first one was this limiting belief, like you called it, which it literally is just like, well, I went to school for this, so I need to work in this field like for the rest of my life. I think so many people get caught up in that mentality because probably because of fear, probably because of external pressure from like their families, probably because of like internal pressure, because you're just like, well, I spent all this money to get this degree, so if I don't use it, like, did I just waste however many years and however many dollars? Um, so how did you actually get past that?
Yeah. So, I mean, what you're saying is exactly it, especially with student loan debt and how high that is. You want to justify that you have to do this career in order to pay that number off. And
Mm-hmm.
what, interestingly enough, the way that I really let that go was finding the source of that belief for me. And I had very supportive parents in terms of they were my number one cheerleaders. So they were always the ones to say, like, you can do it, lo puedes lograr. That was like our motto. And that actually put more pressure on me to achieve that thing that I had on paper for them. Because with my parents and that cultural context of not really understanding what public relations and marketing really was, I had
Mm-hmm.
to almost validate it by way of titles, like, oh, you don't really understand my industry, but you understand what directora, what director means, right? So like I had to continue to validate it with titles. And then I realized, like, you can make your parents happy without having to validate these things. And then going even deeper, I realized that my mother, who I love and not by her fault, she was always someone who wanted to do something else, but never had. She believed that she couldn't do it. She believed that America says you must work in a job to make money. So she was actually passionate about decorating. She would actually repurpose and upcycle antique furniture and sell it to friends and neighbors and never pursue that full time. And that stuck with me because I know that she wasn't super happy in the job she was in. So I thought, well, it doesn't matter if you're unhappy, you have to do it. It's work. And that translated into just needing to continue to do this one linear defined path on paper. But when I really dug deeper, and when I say dug deeper, I my way of doing it is journaling. You can also meditate on these things. You can even have conversations with your family and parents about these things. But I journaled until I couldn't ask myself more questions. I kept asking
Mm.
myself, but why? But why did you think that? Going back to my college years, why did you think you had to study that? It was kind of just digging until you always end up in your childhood self some way. And that's where I landed and realized that I forgave my mother for putting those beliefs in my mind. And when I say forgave, it was just kind of, I put that thought out there. I didn't really have that conversation with her. And then that allowed me to let that
Yeah.
that belief go and then move forward in a direction that was more aligned with what I was passionate about. And I am thankful that I went to school because I was the first in my family to actually graduate from a university. So that was a huge celebration for my family and a huge milestone. But I didn't need to be 100% connected to that one thing I studied. I take my college experience now as a family celebration and also a testament to the fact that I could commit to something, right? Like actually going to school and finishing, that's a commitment in itself. And that
Yeah.
is the celebration now versus I have this title and I must match my career.
I love that so much. And again, that story resonates so much with me because my parents both came to this country from Puerto Rico, and they just got stuck in, the 9 to 5. Like, we just got to work for the sake of working to provide for our families. But I know there's things, my father's always talked about opening a restaurant. He's never done it, partially because my mom has always just been like, we're not here for that. Like, you just need to work. We'll
Mm,
retire at 65. Stop disrupting the stability that we've built. And I think, we can definitely fall down the rabbit hole of comfort and stability, and it actually ends up stifling us in ways that we never imagined.
Yeah,
So, I would love to dive into your career trajectory. So, you graduate, you start working, and at some point you're like, I'm ready to go out on my own and do this on my own. So, can you walk us through what that process was like?
for sure. So I studied public relations and leadership studies. And thankfully, my program, I went to Florida State University, Gold Knolls, if anyone's and the public relations program was very small. It was a cohort of 30 people, super difficult to get into, which was like a whoa in itself. And that program size allowed for us to start getting work experience while we were still in school. So on my senior year, so my last year of being in the program, I already got a job as a junior account coordinator, which is traditionally the first entry level job in a public relations field when you graduate. So I had that one extra year of experience so that when I cap and gown left university, I was already almost at that second level. So thankfully did have that advantage. I then worked in Tallahassee, Florida was where the agency was. I worked there for 2 years before formally leaving to Miami. I did have a stint in New York where I did an internship. I was working for Broadway doing publicity, which was a dream because I'm a total Broadway head and I love performance arts. But
Me too.
yeah, but then at the time I was like, well, I can't stay in New York because it's way too expensive. I mean, when
Hmm.
you're making an intern salary of, I think I had a stipend that was $200 a month, and then I was
Wow.
working in retail at nights. I was like, no way can I afford living in New York City. So I was there for a full 4 month internship, and then I said, I'm gonna take my butt right back to Florida, happily. And I ended up saying that I'm going to go work in Miami because Miami gave me the comfort of being able to be around my family and then continue to build my career. So I did that for a few years. And then finally, 4 years into my career, I decided to go to New York. I was working at Havas. And I actually have a funny story while we have time.
Yes.
When I was applying for jobs to move to New York City, my dream agency, and I'm big on manifestation, was Ogilvy. And Ogilvy was known for being, one of the founding fathers of advertising. And I wanted to work in some way at that agency. And give me 1 second. There is some noise in this house.
It's okay. We can edit that out.
Yeah. I don't want you to get the background. Okay, so I wanted to work so badly at Ogilvy as an agency, and I actually applied for a job that would hopefully move me to New York City. And the job itself was actually not even a lateral move, it was almost a step backward. But I wanted so badly to work at this agency, so I applied. I ended up getting a call back from the agency where they wanted to interview me, but I missed the phone call. And then upon missing the phone call, I tried so hard to reschedule and they just like couldn't make it work. And I was like, oh my God, I lost the opportunity to work at my dream agency.
Mm.
That pause that manifestation. And then I ended up going to Havas and working there in 2016. It was actually an incredible experience. I worked there for almost 3 years and I kind of worked, that's where I started to really climb that corporate PR and social media ladder. So when I say PR, I was doing campaigns for consumer products. So anything you can pretty much buy at a store, those are things I was creating campaigns around. Everything from sparkling water to healthy foods to campaigns for just thought leadership and nonprofit campaigns. I also did some work with social media, which eventually translated into influencer marketing. It was kind of the first time that we started to pay influencers, and I became really this expert in influencer marketing because I was the only one to be doing it at the time. And
Mm.
I, at the same time, had my blog started. So I offered that perspective of being a creator and building campaigns. So that said, Havas really offered me that opportunity. They let me be more entrepreneurial within my own capacity where I was able to build programs that had never been done. I was able to support them in building what the influencer capability looked like, meaning how does the agency even work with influencers? And that positioned me as this leader in the influencer marketing space. I was sitting on panels, I was doing a lot of that work. At the same time, again, building my blog where I was a little bit of a lifestyle blog, but then also giving people influencer marketing advice. Very kind of a messy blog, messy action. But those two things at the same time help position me as this expert in influencer marketing. Where then, many, many years later, so now at the beginning of 2019, Ogilvy, the quote dream agency that I wanted to work for, called me and said, "We see what you're doing, and we actually want to hire you as an influencer marketing specialist." So I was their director of influencer marketing, which was
Wow.
incredible experience. Again, like this manifestation that showed up in a totally different way, came to my doorstep. And at that time in 2019, I had already been thinking I might want to go off on my own because what I'm doing for the agency I'm at is building programs from scratch and kind of advising the agency how to even work with influencers. And I was
Mm-hmm.
already making money as an influencer. So I thought I could go off on my own. But when Ogilvy called, I said, I can't pass this up because I've always wanted to work for the agency anyway. And the position was, in a sense, entrepreneurial because it was new, not just for them, but it was new as a concept. Many agencies
Mm-hmm.
weren't hiring people to strictly focus on influencer marketing because that industry was just recently growing. And now they were one of the first to say, we need to have experts in house that are only doing influencer marketing. And that helped me continue to establish myself as an expert in this space. At the same time, I was also already, my side hustle was as a life coach and business coach. So, what I was doing was a bunch of scattered work, right? I had the 9 to 5, but I had a side hustle as a coach. I had a side hustle as a creator. And I also had a side hustle consulting people on how to do social media. So, all
Mm-hmm.
things combined became very messy for me, actually. So, I had to figure out how do I step away or consolidate all these things I'm doing into my own business? And that was a really difficult question that took getting to a lot of clarity. It wasn't so much the financial fear of leaving my 9 to 5, and I'll give you a little philosophy on that, but it was really having the clarity to see that path forward. That's really what I was missing. And what ended up happening is through actually working with a business coach, that was the first time that I was able to get a little bit of clarity and realize that I am an influencer marketing expert. Now, how can I be both an expert for brands who need me as a consultant and an expert for creators who need me as their educator and as their mentor? And being a coach, I then decided, well, why not focus on business coaching for influencers? Hadn't been
Mm-hmm.
seeing people do this before. Aside from being talent managers, a lot of people weren't helping influencers. And
Mm-hmm.
in the beginning of 2020, I made the decision. I told Ogilvy, it is time. I am going off on my own. And actually, they were very supportive, where I was still able to work for them and build campaigns for them, but now as a freelancer and as a consultant for them. And that transition is something that I also recommend to people because I know it may be scary to completely leave your 9 to 5 cold turkey the next day, but perhaps have a conversation where you can be part time or where you can still be a consultant for them if you're in a service industry where you can provide some sort of expertise for them. But just
Mm-hmm.
really finding a way to transition easy, I think Ogilvy definitely helped me by doing that. And then I started to, on the back end, develop what does it look like to coach influencers? How do I even get these clients? And a lot of that being, having a social media presence, being more social media forward and having that social strategy background, I decided that I'm going to make my ideal client and my ideal follower creators. Whether you're an aspiring creator, whether you are a established creator that just needs to level up your business and not just how you work with brands and getting sponsorships, but truly building a business, which is something that was missing. Influencers for so long have just been getting paid to work with brands. They create a photo, they move along, and that is not a sustainable way for you to scale and for you to build a business. So I started to really talk about that and start to attract that kind of audience. And I would say over the course of this year, so, about 8 months deep, I have built that more established presence as an influencer coach. And I have worked with now dozens of influencers on their own businesses, also dozens of aspiring creators on how to build their own brand on social media while still at the same time doing the consulting work for agencies where I'm able to tell them how to work with influencers. And now the way I position myself is like, I'm basically the bridge, right? If a brand,
Mm-hmm.
I've got you as a consultant. I can also provide, yes, sponsorships on my feed. If a creator needs me, I've got your back as a coach and as an educator. And I have built my first group coaching program, launched in July, and it completely blew my expectation out of the water. It was a 12-week program where I'm teaching either aspiring or established creators how to solidify and build their brand further so they can both monetize by working with brands and launch some sort of digital offer. And that was really important to me because I'm very big on you can't just show up and be, hey, I'm an influencer. You've got to
Right.
build a brand around who you are, around who you want to serve. And those are the kind of people I want to teach. And that said, I feel like that really is the key to building a community, which is one of the most common questions. It's like, how do I even build a community? How do I get people engaged with me? And it's like, you really have to build a brand around yourself and then offer value and offer more of your personal story and really, just all those things I feel like you can teach, but you also have to teach the confidence to show up online. I felt like a 12-week program, that structure gave me the time to coach people while also providing modules that give you all the tactical stuff. Like, I can show you how to use Instagram by you watching a video. I can't show you how to be confident. So I need to guide you.
Right.
I need to talk to you. So this kind of a hybrid of both course and coaching was really, really special for me. And the first cohort completely sold out. I had a goal of 10 people and then had more people who wanted to be a part of it. So I squeezed in 4 extra people. We've got 14 students in the class. And I think that I will definitely continue to do more of these in the future. But this was, again, just really important to me. And then all this said, I was actually recently named a top 10 social media coach by Yahoo Finance, which is
Wow. Congratulations.
thank you. So, so awesome because again, I've just been doing this because I'm passionate about it and I have fun and it's work that I want to do. And to be recognized just tells me, oh, this is the stuff I can share with my parents who don't understand a single thing about what I'm doing. But I can just tell them, I know you don't get it, but look, I'm on the news. And they're like, yay, you must
Right.
be paying your rent somehow. So that was really, really exciting. But that's pretty much the journey. I was in the 9 to 5, very literal, this is what I studied, this is what I do route. But when I allowed myself to be a little more entrepreneurial within my own means, which was within my own 9 to 5, I started to really figure out what it could be to work for myself or to work independently. And that helped me, I think, really translate over into the things that I'm doing now.
That's amazing. Such a powerful story of really understanding your skill set and transforming them into something that serves not only you financially, but it also serves your passion. And you can tell by the content that you're creating and what you're doing in the world. Like, I can see your passion for what you do and I can see your authenticity. And so, one of the things that I get a lot of questions about, as someone who's also been in the influencer space for about 7 years now, a lot of people are kind of like battling with imposter syndrome. They're like, oh, but like, who am I to be talking about stuff and like teaching people things? So, did you ever have to deal with feeling like an imposter, especially like in an industry that, like you said, you were basically breaking barriers as you went along and creating the space that didn't exist? So, how do you deal with that?
That is a great question. I like to say I am a recovering from imposter syndrome. It is something that definitely was one of the big obstacles for my own business growth. The way that imposter syndrome showed up for me, and I didn't realize this until much later, was I felt the need to continue to get education and certification and work and take the courses and do a bunch of stuff instead of just taking action and starting to actually do the work. And I
Mm,
was doing this because I felt that I needed to validate everything that I was doing by titles and certifications. And I think that this was part, this feeling of having to prove yourself because of the story that I carried and the narrative that I thought I had to continue to have, which was if I can't prove it to my parents, if I can't prove the title to my parents, they have no idea what I'm doing. So that was
mhm.
one part. And then second was being in social media, you're of course seeing what everyone is doing at all times. Even if we don't intentionally consume things to see what our competitors are doing, you just see it. Even the way that Instagram serves you ads, I get ads all the time for people doing things that are similar to me. So it's just constantly being pushed out with content that could make you fall into the imposter syndrome trap, where I felt like, well, if someone else already did something similar, I probably shouldn't be doing this because I'm like, what am I going to do? I'm not good enough. They did it first. And I always thought of myself as a confident person in a social setting, sure. But when it came to my career, the imposter syndrome was something that paralyzed me sometimes with not moving forward. And I found that the way out for me was to continue to take action. I like to say that action builds confidence. And it was little tiny actions that just continued to prove to myself that, oh, I can do this. Or I just put out this random post with influencer tips and it totally blew up and it was so shareable. And I'm like, okay, so I can continue doing this. And even it's not just getting that feedback from your community, but just proving to yourself that, oh, that wasn't that scary. Putting myself out there wasn't that bad. That helped me move away from imposter syndrome. I coupled that with really digging into my own personal story. And this is something that I make all my coaching clients do. It sounds simple, but the thing is, it's actually really hard for you to come to terms with. You have to write down your milestones, your challenges, what you learned from those things. Seriously, like what did it feel to have that milestone? How did you wake up the next day from that one big moment in your life that you're remembering? Or how did you even pick yourself up from that bad moment that you're remembering? And all those things eventually you realize have some sort of connection to your business and some sort of connection to your expertise or the way you do things. And having confidence in my personal story continued to remind me that one, I am good enough because I have experiences that can validate why I want to do this. Not just the what, not just because I've had the title or the 9 to 5, but the experiences that I've had make me an entrepreneur and I am worthy of doing that. And then also having confidence that if that's your personal story, you cannot build the same business as someone else because they have a totally different personal story. So you start to realize that your competitors can't even be your competitors because they're not you. And it's super cheesy and woo woo, but it is a fact. Some people will work with you because of who you are. There are a million or 1,000 people doing exactly what you're doing. But if you're the only one who's doing it with that experience and that personal story. So people will connect with you for that. And even the way you show up on social media, I constantly remind people you have to add a little bit of that personal story and personal element because it builds that relatability and that trust with who you want to work with. And then again, you continue to differentiate yourself from your competitors because you are showing up from a place that is totally ownable to you. And now you're setting yourself apart. So that helped my imposter syndrome go away, realizing one, I'm worthy, I'm good enough. I'm taking action to continue to reinforce that. But I know myself and I know my story, and no one else has it. And if they don't want to work with me because someone else is offering something that they prefer, awesome. I'm glad that they found someone they want to work with. But the people who want to work with me are going to find me. And that's
I love that. That's such a powerful message. I think it speaks to this idea that um, it, like you said, it doesn't matter how many other people are doing what you want to do. They cannot be you. You have to own your story. And I think a lot of people get afraid to be their authentic selves, especially online, because they might be subject to criticism. Putting yourself out there is scary. And so, what advice do you have for like being able to deal with potential criticism that might come from being in this space?
yeah. This is an answer that I love to give, but I know people hate hearing. The reality check is that there will always be someone who doesn't like what you're doing, even
Mm,
off social media. Someone who is by way of your environment in your life just totally dislikes what you're doing or doesn't like you as a person. It's not personal, it's because they have some sort of triggers that they don't like about you. So when I remind myself of that, I actually become more confident because I'm like, no matter what I do, someone out there just won't like it. And not to say that they're a hater, but it's not something that they're looking for. However, if I stopped myself from giving that message for that person who needs to hear my message misses out. And I'm here to serve that person who needs to hear my message. So just knowing that the value and the weight of having someone who really loves what you're saying, and not just the inspirational stuff, but just the fun stuff or the stuff that just like is raw and vulnerable. That person out there that needs to hear it is waiting for that message. And how, but like, I would be so bummed out if that person didn't receive it because I was worried about that other fulano who like doesn't care. So I just remind myself every day of like who I'm serving and who I'm serving, and the fact that the other people, it does not matter what opinion they have. And also realizing that on the flip side, people are craving more vulnerability and more reality on social media. So if you can offer people that, you are already a leg up. Especially in the influencer world, there are so many influencers who either are plateauing or are just not doing so well right now because they're stuck in this cycle of having to talk only about themselves or showing off or having to create this fake lifestyle of I'm traveling here, I'm wearing this, and nothing about who they are as a person. So if you can
Mm.
show up in a place of vulnerability and just show up real and raw, you are already above the competition. So just continuing to know that that's what people need, and remind yourself of that person who needs to hear your message, because then you'll feel almost like this draw to say, I have to give them this message. Like they're waiting to hear it. I don't care about that person who doesn't care.
Yeah, yeah, that's such a powerful message. So, your story sounds amazing, but I'm sure you have encountered some setbacks or failures throughout your journey as an entrepreneur. So, I'm curious if you could share one of those.
Yeah. One setback is more from a personal perspective. Depending on how you see it, it could be a good thing or a bad thing. But I, in 2018, told my debt story, talked about how I got out of debt. But the reality was that I got into debt because I was consumed by all the things I was seeing on social media. You know, all
Mm,
the influencers buying stuff, going on trips that I couldn't afford, but I just put it on a credit card. And all these things kind of racked up. And I told this story to a journalist who formerly interviewed me for the New York Post. And if we know the New York Post, they love a good clickbait headline. So the headline said, how wanting to be an influencer threw me into financial ruin. So
oh,
headline became made the article go entirely viral. Daily Mail picked it up next, and Daily Mail pulled all my photos from the last 3 years, which again, the story was how I got out of debt, but they made it look like the thing I did a week ago was a lavish experience that put me back into debt. So the
oh,
story
wow.
became super confusing, and it went viral worldwide. I would say for about a week, everyone was talking about this story. And I did end up getting a lot of people coming to my page then being really angry with me. It was so bizarre because the headline was also about how I was $10,000 in credit card debt. Truthfully, $10,000 is not that much when you look at the average of how much people are in debt. I know you know the debt stories of many people,
Mm-hmm.
probably. People are many numbers into debt. So that was really confusing to me on like why that even went viral. But the catch was it was this influencer story. So people at the time in 2018 were so thirsty to prove that influencer marketing was fake and we're all frauds and everything is not real. So this story turned into how influencers are totally fake and everything you see online is fake, fake, fake. When my platform was all about authenticity. So I was like,
Oh my gosh.
so I had this like freak out moment, and I got a lot of cyberbullying during this time. And again, I'm a very confident and strong person, but I cracked. I mean, there was one night where I was bawling for hours, especially because my parents, again, not understanding what social media really does or is, they're seeing me all over. I'm talking worldwide headlines where parents from, their family members from Ecuador are saying, like, well, what's wrong with your daughter? My family in Spain was like, are you okay? Are you living on the streets? It was so
Oh my
bad.
God.
So this whole thing, any entrepreneur would love to go viral because they're like exposure. But this exposure was quite negative, I think, to myself as a brand. So I had to spend the next few months really rebranding or reinforcing what my brand was on social media. And also then I started to become a little bit confused. I started to lose any clarity that I had because I thought I even got an influx of followers. I would say about 10,000 followers showed up who are now looking for money advice. And I'm like, whoa, I just got out of debt. Like, I can't tell you how to get out of, I became really confused. Like, do I talk about money now? Am I now a money platform? And then having to use my as many connections as I had with like PR, right? So working with journalists to then replant my story of, hey, here's how I got out of debt, or here's how to be a more authentic influencer. And it worked in the end because I really had to sit down and craft a whole new narrative for myself. I ended up, for example, going on Good Morning America, and I talked about how I got out of debt and why you should show up authentically online. Like, that is the dream. That is exactly
Right.
what I wanted. So having more of those stories where I was talking about, yeah, I told my debt story because I wanted to prove that being authentic online builds more community and builds more conversation. And it did, right? It built a viral conversation. But
Absolutely.
that period of time where I was viral was the scariest, most awful period ever. And every single person who knew me in my life, who I went to high school with, elementary school with, started showing up. And everyone's like, are you okay? Like, they didn't even read the full article that says, here's her tips and tricks on how she. No, everyone just reads the headline, the intro, and they're over it. And it was just an awful time to go viral. Um,
Isn't that so symbolic of just like a society in general? They just look at the clickbait and they don't actually like read the details, because I'm sure, was the story written in a way that like spun the whole thing negatively and was just like, look at this ridiculous influencer getting herself into debt, or was the story actually like substantive?
It was a little bit spinned. I will
Yeah.
say it was 70%. Here's all the things that got her into debt. And what's funny is
Mm.
the interview, and this happens again, caution tale. When you interview with journalists, you've really got to know who you're talking to. And I
Yeah.
give as little information as possible on the being an influencer, getting me into debt part, because I was like, well, I wasn't trying to be an influencer. I was just shopping because I kept seeing influencers go on trips and I had no idea what points were. So I paid a $700 ticket to like Texas. So really like explaining how I just was like a very uneducated young millennial going to brunch every day that put me into debt. And that coupled with when I came to New York, I gave them that whole experience of my wake up call. They then, the article ends with, thankfully now she's out of debt. And what she does is she uses Rent the Runway and started a savings account. If you would like more information, please, it's like,
Oh wow. They
so
really dumbed down your accomplishments like
yeah,
drastically.
well, so then, but I had to then reach out to new journalists. Business Insider was one that actually wrote an article about how I got out of debt, which was really great. They, of course, the intro and the hook is this influencer spending, right? Like they want to talk about that. So let's talk about it, but let's talk about how, not just like how to get out of debt, but the issue, which is we are not being our authentic selves online. A lot of what we see is not transparent enough and it makes people overspend. This happened to me. I got out of debt and now I actually have a business based off of social media because at the time I was already working with brands and we talked about those three kind of elements. And funny enough, Business Insider also had to verify my bank account to make sure I was out of debt, which was awesome because I was like, in case you think I'm still in debt, this article proves like I literally don't have any credit card debt. So that was really exciting. But I had to reestablish myself, work with new journalists, and really just have a whole PR moment to
Wow.
yeah.
That's a really important lesson in, like you said, being careful about who you talk to, putting who you put your information, you know, whose hands you put your information in, which is something that I feel like a lot of people don't think about, especially if they're like new influencers and they just want press. It's like not all press is good press. Like you need to do your due diligence, because just going viral for the sake of exposure is not a vibe if it's going to just lead to you being stereotyped in a way that doesn't actually fit what you're trying to portray in the world.
Yeah, you get stereotyped, and the followers that you attract are not the community you want to have. And
Mhm.
that also, again, added to that confusion of I got so many followers interested in money, but 3 months from now, when they don't see me posting, like your page is a beautiful resource for money and financial tips. If they're not seeing that, they're out, or they're not engaging
Right.
because now they're just a number that is contributing to me having no engagement. So
True.
really talking about that. But the good thing is, I did find more purpose in talking about my money limiting beliefs. And as at that point, moving into more of the life coaching space, and I started to explore that, I realized that helping people with their money mindset was very important through my personal story, but I am not your financial advisor. So the way that I positioned myself was like, I'm your money BFF, right? So like, I'll talk to you about money, but I'm not going to tell you like the tangible things you need to go take to the bank account.
Hmm.
But that rebranding was really fun.
Yeah. I mean, everything serves its purpose, even if you don't understand why it's happening at that specific time. So, one of the things that you talk about a lot is authenticity. And as innate as it sounds, like being your authentic self, I don't think a lot of people really understand what that means. Can you talk us through what authenticity looks like, especially in an influencer space?
Yeah, and what a buzzword. I feel like that's the last few years buzzword of being an influencer. Be authentic.
Mm-hmm.
And every influencer will tell you like the number one secret is to be authentic. But what that really means is coming to terms with your own personal story and speaking from that place and not being afraid to talk about the milestones and the challenges, because those are the things that people connect and relate to. It shows that you are not just curating your presence online. You're not just putting out the things that are the highlight reels. You're also talking about just your life. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes we also think not just maybe being afraid of showing up as you and from a place of your personal story, but a lot of us think we're not interesting. That is one of the things
Mm.
I hear the most from people who are confident. They're just like, well, I mean, kind of boring. And I'm like, so is everyone else. Like, we're all boring. And like, we want to hear that. We want you to tell us how like you are kind of boring. So it's really just like showing up from whatever you would tell your friend, that your best friend who's sitting next to you. If you can tell people that online, and I'm not just talking about revealing all your private life, but just the way you speak and the way you come across, that is being your authentic self. It is that simple. You just show up as who you are in front of your friends, in front of your family, and you start to build that community. And again, that helps people connect with you, because then you're not just some like graphic on Instagram floating in space or a pretty photo. You're a real person, and people
Mm.
want to see that. And it's also okay if you are an influencer or a creator who likes to curate, right? Maybe you're a creative. For example, for me, I love taking photos. So I will always have a high resolution photo that looks staged or posed, but that's because I love photography. That is okay. But then I always remind people, maybe it's through my Instagram stories or in the way that I communicate with them, like, I'm also just a totally real human with frizzy hair and no filter. Because I just want to remind people that I'm passionate about those things you see. And when I work with brands, I am a marketer. So I want to make beautiful curated photos for the brand. But I also like really like this product. So let me just tell you about it face to face on stories. So it's having that balance of doing what you like to do and curating the way that you want to have, being as strategic as you want to be, because at the end of the day, you're building businesses, but also showing up as yourself.
Love that advice. So you've been able to amass almost 50,000 followers on Instagram, and I'm sure there's a ton of people that ask you, how do I do the same thing? How do I build an audience? So what advice do you have for them?
Number one, again, go back to your personal story, because I find that the first thing people are thinking of is, what category do I put myself into? Am I a lifestyle blogger? Am I a this blogger, food blogger? And at the end of the day, you are not, those are like the content pieces that you might create, but you need to figure out who you are as a personal brand. And if you have no marketing experience, just go back to your personal story and start to find the connecting dots. What are the patterns? When you go back to the things you like to talk about, ask yourself, well, why do I like to talk about style? Why do I like to talk about food? Whatever it is for you, ask yourself the why do you care, to then start to figure out maybe what's the deeper purpose behind that. For example, if you love talking about fashion or affordable fashion, like, why did that really matter to you? And what problem did that solve in your life? And once you start to behind the scenes answer that question, you're developing a personal brand. Second piece to that, that's really, really important. When you kind of already know a little bit about who you are as a person and your story, you have to figure out who is your ideal audience member. And your ideal audience member is important because we're not just creating content that we love, we also have to create content that has value. But value is only determined by the person on the other side of the screen. So you have to figure out who's the judge, right, that you care about, who's the person
Mm-hmm.
that's going to say, is this valuable for me or not? And then those two things combined with you as a personal brand and figuring out who your ideal follower is will really set you up. That's kind of like the starting point to you creating content, because you're going to figure out, oh, I really want to talk about fashion because it's important to like what I love, and I kind of figured out like why I care. But that person on the other side of the screen, the affordable fashion tips, they need that because they actually don't have time. It's not even a financial thing for them. It's just like they don't really have time to shop, so they'd rather just do it all at once. So I'm really solving this like time problem for them. So maybe I'm talking to busy millennials, busy millennial women, and you really start to get deeper and deeper. One thing I teach my students and people I work with one on one, I have like 30 questions to ask about your ideal follower and who you are as a brand. And you can honestly ask yourself those questions. It's always just like, why? Why do they care? What more? And you're really just like getting deeper and deeper into those two things. It does not matter what camera you have. It does not matter what content looks like. But if you know who you are as a brand and you know who your ideal follower is, you have solved so many of your problems because everything else starts to build itself out.
Mm, great advice. I have one last question for you, and I get this question so much, and I'm curious to get your take on it. How do you actually start pricing your services as an influencer?
Ooh, yes, frequently asked question.
Mm-hmm.
So I actually have a rate formula that I have on social media if you want to have more of a visual, but there's a few elements. So you actually have to consider three spaces. One, the time it takes for you to create that content. No matter how big you are, the time that it takes to create that content is something you need to charge for. And when I say charge, compensation can look differently for you at different levels. I'll get to that piece, but you need to figure out what investment of my day will be had and how do I want to price myself for that. The way you price yourself is dependent on the expertise level you have. So for example, if you're just a beginner and someone is asking you to create content might take you 2 hours to create, but you literally have no idea what you're doing, you're using your iPhone, which is totally fine, then you might price yourself at something more of like a $15 to $20 an hour versus $200 an hour. You've been doing this for years and decades and you have a master's. So that is kind of like something that you really have to determine for yourself in terms of the dollar amount, but you have to consider the time that it will take. Part two is the deliverables. So, what are people actually asking you to do? This is where my rate formula kind of helps, but all the how I like people to start is figure out what platform they're asking you to be on. And then an easy baseline is your follower count divided by 100 is like a beginner's base. Base means like you will not take anything less than that. But a more expert's baseline could be your follower count divided by 50 or 25. Again, you're just really like increasing the expertise level, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then, other than that, not just the content they want you to create, but every campaign will have exclusivity, meaning they want you to avoid working with competitors. Every single campaign has it, whether it's exclusivity for 24 hours or exclusivity for a year. And then you actually have to price yourself, add more to not just the content you're creating, but now you are not able to work with competitors for a period of time. So you have to add some money in there for yourself because you're missing out on business opportunities. The other piece to that, to the deliverables, every campaign will have usage rights. So the reason why I say these things in these very clear words is because you can literally, this is something you have to ask when you're working with brands. Like, what deliverables do you need from me? What's the exclusivity? And what are the rights you want to my content? Because they might just want to repost it on social media, or they might want to own your content forever, or they might want to have the rights to put it in a TV ad. That is something you need to be charging a lot more money for. I'm talking thousands, because think about how much they would pay an agency to create this, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So you really have to, when you're pricing yourself, add up all these elements. So it's difficult to kind of give you all these math numbers off top of head because I'm not a math person. Calculator sits with me, but we've talked about again the time it takes to create the actual campaign itself, and those three elements are very important of deliverables, exclusivity, and usage. And then the last element is really your expertise. So I can't even answer that with a dollar amount because it is something that you learn over time. Something that I actually did was when I, put these numbers together, I wrote down line items, right? Time it takes, deliverables, exclusivity, usage. And I had this number, right, that I was so used to giving. I just started to increase my number with every campaign. That was kind of
Mm.
that variable of my worth. I just started to ask for more money. One time I doubled it and people said, yes, great, that's my new rate. And then the next time I double it again. And now I realize that, it's difficult sometimes for us to know our worth off top of mind, but it does take practice as a business owner over time. And once you can get those tactical things in of a formula, the thing I can't explain to you is how much you truly are worth. So, my recommendation, if you have a little bit of fear or you're still a little bit afraid of asking for more money, is when in doubt, double it. And then if they say yes, it truly like if they say yes, that's your new rate. If they say no, can we meet halfway? The halfway is now your new rate. So, really working that out over time.
Yeah, that's such great advice. And you can tie it back to salary negotiation at a job, right? You never want to come out with the first number. You want to find out what their budget is and work from there.
Exactly. And that's something too that I recommend. A lot of influencers or creators, or especially beginners, they get a lot of asks to quote work for free, right? And
Mm.
so I get a question of, well, how do I turn it into money? And just bring up the conversation. Just write back, hey, what budget did you have in mind for the things you're asking for? Let's talk about it and start to have a conversation about money with the brand. The ones who don't want to pay you will say, sorry, we can't pay you. And then you decide, is it even worth doing this or not? And the ones who will pay you will now start talking to you about money. And that's how you get more comfortable asking for more as well.
Absolutely. It is a muscle that you have to train, just like everything else.
Yeah. That's one thing we don't say enough. It's like the money mindset stuff, it's a muscle. It's a workout.
Yes, absolutely. So, speaking of mindset, and since you are so into manifestation, I'm curious if you have a money mantra and if you would share it with us.
I do. It's actually in Spanish. It's lo puedo lograr. And the reason for that is that I believe that I attract money when my confidence and my self-worth is at 100%. And it's not always at 100%. So I have to repeat myself this mantra every single day, lo puedo lograr, which means yes, I can achieve this, so that I drop the imposter syndrome and start to attract the people who need to be my clients. The other thing that it's not even a money mantra, but I have a money activity. Speaking of muscle, I have a daily money workout. I literally put on a money playlist on Spotify. Quiero Dinero is one of the songs, by the way.
Hey!
And I just shake it to money. I just put a song on and dance around my living room, like literally shaking my butt to whatever money song pops up in my playlist of the day. And it makes me actually inject more joy into money because I grew up with seeing money as like this evil thing, and by dancing around every day to a money song, it makes me be more happy with money, more comfortable with money. And it sounds so silly, but once you do it, you start to really see, you feel like a money magnet because you're like, I'm kind of shaking it for you and the money is dripping in, right? So that is two things I do. So repeating that mantra, but also just dancing.
I love that advice. Lisa, this conversation has been amazing. So, I just want, if you could share, where can we find out more about you and follow your journey?
Thank you. It has been so amazing too. I'm so thankful also for what you do for everyone on social media because your advice is so, first of all, valuable, but then also important, especially as a Latina. I so love and respect you. So thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Yeah, and you can find me at Lisette Calv, so my name shortened, everywhere. I'm most active on Instagram and TikTok, and I talk about influencer marketing advice for creators, but then also sometimes my money journey and my business journey as well.
Amazing. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Bye bye.
I love this episode. I hope you did too. I think it's so important for you to think about how you can transfer your 9 to 5 skills to launch your own business. And it doesn't have to be a full on, I'm going to quit my job and just YOLO type of situation. You can literally use the skills that you're learning right now in your 9 to 5 to start a side hustle. And who knows, it could turn into something that is beyond your wildest dreams. But don't sell yourself short. When you think of the word business, a lot of people get caught up in like this whole idea, oh my God, I'm starting a corporation. I got to have employees. I got to do the whole thing. No, girl, a business can be a solopreneur type situation that lets you use your skills to monetize what you're good at and do something that you're passionate about. So, hope that gets your wheels turning. I hope that it inspires you to think a little bit outside the box. And definitely, if you're loving this podcast, if you're loving this episode, please make sure to share, rate, review, and subscribe. As a reminder, if you're loving the Yo Quiero Dinero podcast, please make sure to rate, review, subscribe, and share. That way, amazing listeners like you can find us too. We want everybody out here being poderosa with their money. And so if they know about us, they can start doing that too. If you don't already follow us on social media, make sure that you follow the Yo Quiero Dinero podcast on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, Pinterest, and even TikTok. Yep, we're doing TikToks too. And don't forget to visit the Yo Quiero Dinero podcast blog, where you can find episode show notes, as well as personal finance articles, news about events, and more. Until next time, guys, stay inspired, stay confident, and stay poderosa. On the Yo Quiero Dinero podcast and associated entities, all information provided is for general information purposes only and does not constitute accounting, legal, tax, or other professional advice. Listeners should not act upon the content or information found here without first seeking appropriate advice from an accountant, financial planner, lawyer, or other professional. We assume no responsibility for information contained on this podcast and associated entities and disclaim all liability with respect to such information, including but not limited to any liability for errors, inaccuracies, omissions, or misleading or defamatory statements. Usage of this podcast and associated content constitutes an explicit understanding and acceptance of the terms of this disclaimer.